Hey there, highlighters. Erin King here, and today I'm super stoked to bring you an incredible thought leader, Connie Steele. Connie Steele, welcome to Highlights. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you for having me, Erin.
Oh my gosh, well, we are so excited to hear more about building the business of you. Your book came out in February, but has been making incredible waves. A system to align passion and growth potential through your own career mashup. You've been in Barnes and Noble, you've been doing media tours. People are definitely talking about this idea of a career mashup, which I love because my husband is a former DJ, and who doesn't love a good mashup on the playlist when you're working out? So tell us about what is a career mashup and why should we be thinking about considering it in our own lives?
Absolutely. So, a career mashup really is this combination of roles, skills, experiences, interests that people now really want to put together in their career because there's this desire to reflect their whole selves. Now, let's face it, the old model of career growth and development was one that was linear, sequential, really siloed and about conformity. But now there's been this fundamental shift to be more fluid, collaborative, multimodal, and multidimensional. It's about individual agency. And so if we want to express who we are, and there's this recognition that we're not one dimensional, right? We have all these talents, we have all these experiences that reflect different aspects of us. We don't want to be able to bring that to the forefront. And so there may be one period in our life where, you might have been, say, a musician, and then another period you were a designer, and then another period you were maybe a marketer. But how can you combine that? Because each of those elements in your life reflected you. So what you're seeing people do is parallel pathing multiple things. So maybe they have a primary job and then they have a side hustle. So they're really essentially creating this portfolio career. Or they are taking all these interesting past experiences and realizing, hey, there's this niche. I could combine all these skills and hobbies and interests into one thing. So whether maybe that's in a corporate job or maybe it's creating their own thing, but it creates this amazing ability to differentiate who you are and bring value in a fundamentally different way. And candidly, you are a great example of one of these career mashuppers and really one of the inspiring stories that led me to needing to write about it.
Oh, that's so nice, Connie. Well, congrats on publishing the book. And you have so many great stories in the book that can inspire people to maybe rethink the in the box thinking that we've been groomed and conditioned, whether culturally or corporately, to believe is the only way forward. So, did you have like a personal aha moment where you realized like I don't have to be tracking the way that I thought that I like should be doing? Like, was there a moment for you, or was it just kind of over time you realized there was more than one way to skin a cat?
The aha moment really was through the learning of all these different people I interviewed. So you being one of them, but I happen to be a podcaster too. And really over these 100 plus interviews I did, and then additional interviews as well with up and coming leaders, trying to understand what was going on. Where were they struggling? Why were they struggling? Who are they turning to? And it became this aha moment when all these insights started to come together. And candidly, it was when I saw this really interesting segment on HBO Real Sports. It was with Justin Tucker, who happens to be one of the most winningest kickers in NFL history, the Ravens. You may know because you're from Baltimore,
exactly
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was so fascinating is that there was a segment about him, and he happens to be an opera singer as well, right? And so he had said that opera helps him be a better athlete. And he had been doing it for years. And it just showed me, wait, this is really interesting. You are reflecting what I'm seeing is that people are combining, honestly, these roles and careers that seem so disparate, but truly there's a connective tissue. And they're doing both. They're parallel pathing both because it makes them feel whole, and it really helps them strive to deliver, performance in a different way and makes them feel whole. So that was one of these major aha moments. And then also just seeing, frankly, in my children and sort of the dynamics that are happening with the youth today, where they don't want to be boxed in. They want to express who they are, who their true identity is. And so not being told that you are male, female, or your race for that matter. My kids are biracial, but you're just seeing this shift to people needing to express who they are. So it was just lots of different data points that I've been seeing, reading, researching, and it was this desire to say, what's going on? And then when I saw that just showing in the media and then connecting it, honestly, I'm a fan of JLo, and I just was watching her career, right? And in the book, I say we all are JLo now because she has pivoted so many different times. And when you ask different people, how would you describe JLo? It's actually different, right? So some people who may know her when she started her career, oh, well, she was a dancer. She was a movie star. She was a singer. But other people may now say, well, no, she's more than that. She's a philanthropist. She's an entrepreneur. She's this. She's all of those things. All of those things. And I'm realizing this is where people are going. Yeah. People want to be all those things.
What if we feel like we're not J-Lo level? Because after the Super Bowl last year or whatever was, I'm like, yeah, but she's J-Lo. No, I hear what you're saying. And I think that I agree with you. I mean, there's definitely a movement towards authorizing ourselves to reject the traditional advice that picking a lane is the only way to have success. I firmly stand by, I think niching down and knowing exactly who you're for is different than committing to one path that you can never alter or change your mind for the rest of your life in order to be successful. I think that's a delineation that's important to make, because I really do think the fastest way to success is to figure out exactly who you're for and chase them down. At the same token, being able to have that freedom, that permission, that authorization to be multi-hyphenate or multi-passionate or whatever the term is, it does feel very freeing and very exciting. And I think that space is going to allow a lot of individuals in the next generation to find their creative flow and find their stride a little faster than maybe our generation, where we felt like it wasn't as okay or it wasn't as allowed. Because I don't know about you, but every time I reinvent, like most people are like, that's a terrible idea, right? Like everyone, like I get a lot more no girl than go girl. And that's my book. Obviously, you're kind of a big deal about audacity, because it's all about, we get big reactions when we're taking big actions. And a lot of times we don't get stuck. We don't know how to start. We get stuck when we get people pushing back against us, saying, I don't like how your actions making me feel, judging, trying to make us play smaller. And I think all those elements are kind of what you're talking about as well in your book, which I think is really exciting. So if someone's listening, my listeners are a lot of network marketers, small business entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs. If they're listening and they're thinking to themselves, I have so many passionate directions in so many different areas, but I'm just so scared because I love the security of the paycheck. I love, what's the quote that is from the Shark Tank guy that said, a salary is a drug corporations give you to help you give up on your dreams or make you forget about your dreams. A salary is a drug that corporations give you to help you forget about your dreams. And I read that from, I think it was Mr. Wonderful or someone on Shark Tank. And I was like, oh my God, that is intense. Now, if you're in corporate, no shame in the corporate game. You could always have an entrepreneurial mindset. You can always have the side hustle, all these things. But if someone is feeling like maybe they're just afraid to branch out, what would be sort of like one of the first steps they could take to get clear on what that first step should look like?
Absolutely. So in the book, what I talk about is that if you have all these ideas, so much of this is to start to develop your own strategic plan, because that premise, building the business of you, really implies that you now have to be your own CEO, because the world has shifted where we are all products and services on the web, whether we like it or not. Mm-hmm. And so people are going to be wanting to know who you are, what you stand for, what is your why, and no different than a business. And how do they create their traction? They develop that strategic plan to help them get there. And so to do this, really, you first start off with understanding, I call spotting the trends. In this 5-part system, it's what are those insights that really tell you where's that white space area that you can fit and that you can play. And so you might have all these great ideas, but which is the one that really can leverage your talents, your skills, but there's also that need in the market where you can fit. And then from there, what you're doing is building out that roadmap, which is creating your compass, but that is laying out those goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics. How are you actually going to achieve that? And so you pick to start maybe that one goal that feels the one that you're most passionate about. Once you understand those dynamics, lay that out, have that initial plan. The third is what you talked about in terms of fear, right? It's preparing for change. So in a corporate setting, it's change management. A lot of us we get scared doing something different. It's new. We don't know if it's going to be successful or not. And it's a fear of shame or failure, anxiety that gets in the way. But the first thing to do is recognize where that fear is coming from. Has it been a past experience that you've had, whether it's been at work or with a person? What's the context of it? So again, get that deeper root as to why, and then play out those scenarios. Well, what would really happen if I did this? Are you catastrophizing the situation? Is it really more like in your head, or is it really likely to happen? And so you're kind of playing this analysis, right? You're playing it out and see, all right, really, it's all in my head. So then what you do is you break it down and say, well, what is the smallest thing that I could do? Because you're never going to achieve that one big thing, right? There's so many steps. It's a journey to get there. So what is that very first thing that you can do that they make you feel comfortable to push past that fear, right? Because once you do it, that one little thing, it feels like a great sense of accomplishment. Then what's the next thing? And what's the next thing, right? And then the next is then building your network. We always need people. So because in your plan, you probably have identified people to talk to. So then you do that. And the last is then figuring out what are those skills? Because again, you've probably identified that as part of your plan. But what are those skills that you need? And all these work together because it's just this dynamic planning process. But it's all under this approach where is start small. You're testing, you're learning, and you're iterating. You're building the courage and confidence to get to that next step. It's hard, but once you break it down into those small things, like maybe just sending the email to someone where you know they could be helpful, and that could be terrifying. I know that, right? It's like, oh my God, this email is taking me like an hour to write, and it's so scary. But once you send it off and you're like, all right, I did it. There's this sense of accomplishment. And maybe that's it.
And achievability, because I think a lot of us, to your point, we think we have to have, the 3-year plan, the 5-year plan. Shoot, I'm jealous when I have friends that share their 90-day plan on social media. I'm like, 90 days. I have like a 90-minute plan sometimes. I mean, it's so tough, especially with, the world opening back up, and we are in the middle of the most massive reset. And it's so weird. I don't know if you feel like this, but I feel like it's so weird to be aware that we're in a space and time that is shifting and disrupting and revolutionizing so much. And we know it's happening, but we can't see exactly how. We know it's only going to be in like 5 or 10 years or maybe even longer, where we're like, oh, the Industrial Revolution, COVID-19, like there was a thing that went down and it changed all the rules. And so it's funny to think about, maybe because, we don't know what the future holds and how much the world is going to have crazy fallouts from the last 2 months. And so it's okay maybe that what success looked like then isn't what it looks like now. Maybe we just give ourselves that grace and that space to say, my plan, it might be, let's just get through the month. Like, let's get through the month and let's do the one thing, right? Like, let's just do the one thing right. It doesn't have to always be that we're changing the world at all times, because that just feels really unattainable, especially with so many unknowns and so many unknown factors. So I love the advice to break it down to the itty bitty baby chunks. That's genius.
Can I add one more thing too? And I love just what you've been saying, because the key thing that's happening now is uncertainty. Well, uncertainty is the new certainty in this world. That's what's so key. And so when you had said, we don't know what's going to happen, that's another key theme that I talk about in the book, because the future is fluid. For me, it's not about automation. It's not about machine learning. Obviously there's this big discussion on diversity, but the future of work, the future in general, is fluidity, because we don't know what's going to happen. And so this whole notion of really going with the flow, you have to. And so the only way to feel like you're making traction when everything just feels kind of squishy is to start small, is to plant a flag, is to start to move forward in these small steps, because that's where you're going to get traction and you're going to feel like you're moving forward. And success now isn't that one big bang. Success is now progress in those really small wins along the way. And so when you then look at it over time, you string together all these movements that you're making. I mean, they build up into momentum, and success can be a feeling. It doesn't have to be this hard and fast metric that I think a lot of us have been forced to live with in a lot of ways, but
Yeah,
it's
I
this
love that.
feeling that you're like, wow, I had this really great day because of a conversation I had with somebody who really picked me up, or maybe this sign that you had from a friend or a new person or something that you did, a post that you did, it got all this attention. But it's all probably signs that you're moving towards that goal that you set, and you got to look at it in that way. So to me, it's now this recognition that you need to redefine success as progress. And that progress
I
is not this big thing, but progress is these small steps along the way and that build up into the bigger definition of success for you in the future.
Okay, I love, love, love the tweetable. Success does not have to be a metric, it can be a feeling. That just feels good to authorize ourselves to make that a thing. I mean, for that to be okay. I mean, how many times do we look at our checklist, our to-do list, our goals, and we like, for example, I mean, just last year I had a revenue goal during the pandemic, and we hit the revenue goal. We surpassed it. We crushed all of our goals, and yet
It's
at the end
amazing.
of the day, I felt depleted, exhausted. I felt satisfied that I didn't feel the like joy and the abundance and that was incredible. I didn't feel great, even though I technically achieved the goals we had set out for. I was like, I just want to go have some fun. Like my goal now is like, I want to feel joy. I want to feel fun. Like that can be a goal. And I think anyone listening right now, if you find that maybe you are hitting your goals and still not feeling the feeling you thought you would feel when you got there, can you give yourself that grace and space and authorize yourself to say, maybe it doesn't have to be a metric. Maybe it's not always this quantitative measurement. Maybe it's a qualitative movement or a qualitative moment, or use your word, of feeling. So, I mean, that just feels light just to even say that's okay. And I don't know how much that would catch on with like team leaders and, corporate, number crunching guys and gals. But I think for our purposes as entrepreneurs, that should definitely be, there should be space on that journal list, on that quarterly target list, for not just the numbers but also the moments and the feelings. And it's just, I've never actually written out a feeling I wanted to accomplish except for recently, and it's incredible because once you speak it into existence, once you put it out there, all of a sudden it starts to come your way, and that intentionality I think is huge. So I love that you said that. Okay, here's my question. When it comes to your truth tellers, when it comes to your personal board of directors, when it comes to the voices that you allow to have a seat at your table, how do you discern who is allowed to influence the opinions that you have about the direction that you're taking with your career matchup?
It comes down to them really understanding you holistically, that they see your broader potential and can assess your aptitude for doing things that might not even be in the wheelhouse that you had before, because
Mm-hmm.
they can assess that passion, they assess your commitment, they assess the way that you operate. And it's not these hard skills. I think a lot of times we all get boxed in ourselves, or we subconsciously might be boxing others because they might not have this checklist of things that they've done. And that's just sort of what traditionally it's been. But now it's about seeing, does this person have the grit? Does this
Mm-hmm.
person have the audacity, right? Do they have that mindset? Are they thinking differently? Which shows a commitment to trying, because let's face it, a lot of things that we do may not work the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have the ability to do it again and think differently and push yourself? So those people that are around you, or may reflect those that could help you in your creating your career mashup, don't necessarily have to be ones that have achieved it already. Because maybe
Yep.
there's one direct path they chose to do it,
Yep.
and they think this is the way you need to get there. In fact, actually having a diversity of experiences, a diversity of approaches, and they could see the bigger picture and say, this is who you really are. I see where you want to get to. How can they actually think big picture and give you optionality in a way that guides you in the right way? But it, to me, aptitude and assessing your aptitude is really important, versus like, you don't have it, it's going to take you too long. All the naysayers, right?
Yep.
That commonly occur.
Yep. Oh, it's so good. So, so good. So I want to ask you this. Tell us, for the highlighters listening, and they're thinking to themselves, Connie's so well spoken. She's used about 10 vocabulary words I need to Google because she's so
Sorry.
bright, which I love. I'm like literally Googling. I'm like, that's a good word. That's a good word. So I love you. You're a prolific contenter. You have written this incredible book. You have excellent wisdom to offer. Tell us about your backstory. Tell us how Connie Steele came to be at this stage in her career. And I want to hear everything. Tell me about what you were like as a little girl, all the way to sort of like why you do what you do. Just tell us, like, if someone was to say, hey, in 3, 4, 5 minutes, who's Connie Steele? Tell us your story.
Sure. So, first generation Chinese American. Academics were honestly a focus in our household. So, not surprising, kind of just grew up in somewhat of the stereotype. I hate to say that, but that was a focus. But I always felt somewhat of a black sheep because that wasn't necessarily me. I loved doing sports. I loved doing a lot of activities. I actually was a captain of my softball team. And so I never quite fit. And I was also very artistic. But this desire to please my parents, because in the Asian community, particularly those with first generation immigrants, their children are a reflection of their success. So you want to make them proud, right? And education, a very linear path through your career where you do great in high school, and then you go to a great college, do well in college, and then that should give you opportunities for a great job, right? And then once you get the great job at a great company, that should kind of set you on your path, right? So that's all I knew. And so, okay, I'm working hard in school, but I had no idea what I'd do. Probably like a lot of people have no idea what they want to do. So I was pushed past this quantitative path in statistics. I'm like, what am I going to do with that? I went to the library and looked at vocational books to see, okay, what am I going to do with this thing? I learned about marketing. I loved it. I'm like, wait, oh my gosh, here's a way to take numbers, understand people, and see how they buy products. I was hooked. So that charted my path down to moving into marketing research. I actually ended up going to grad school, got a greater quantitative degree, but then I happened to work in consumer packaged goods because that was all about brand. And I fell in love with it. So worked at a big CPG company, and had some interesting internships, but I didn't feel like I fit. There was something there that just wasn't moving at the pace I wanted to. And that's when the web was big. I'm like, ooh, this is cool. This is going to change the world. I need to get into it. So I made a pivot to get into technology. And then it felt like home. I think for a lot of us, right? You start off thinking, okay, this is what I want to do. You start working like, oh, that's not it. What is it?
Yeah.
And you need to make that pivot, and you got to test for yourself. So since then, I've been in the tech space in a marketing capacity, but constantly testing and learning in different roles, different industries to see what do I like and what I don't. Because I always, like many, have this growth mindset and want to build. But at some point, I have 2 kids and realized that path to being an executive in a company, that wasn't fulfilling for me. So the last company I was at, a challenging environment, 2 young kids, and said, wait, it was hard. It wasn't the right fit anymore. So I pivoted and decided to chart my own course, but quitting at the time without having a backup, right? Because you didn't quit. Like, so this is 9, 10 years ago, quit without a job. It wasn't common. More common now. I think you can relate to these things too.
Yes, 100%. 100%.
So that started my journey to be an entrepreneur and figuring out, man, how do I define success? What's really going to fit best for me at that point in my life? I had no idea what exactly I was going to do. I just knew that where I was in that corporate path wasn't the right fit because I had to choose. Everything wasn't or. It wasn't an and at the time.
Right.
Life today is much more of an and. So I'm like, all right, if I want to be a part of my kid's life, still learn and grow, this is the path I'm going to have to take, and I have to figure it out. And so that's led me to where I am now, where it's been an opportunity to work with a lot of different clients, but meet so many amazing people and learn to network. So for many of you who are entrepreneurs, networking, creating that business through these great relationships, it's not always easy. It's definitely not easy, but it's something that you can learn and you can build. And so because of that, and because of this passion for understanding what's going on in the future of work, it's just something that I've always loved. And having been in tech and I've seen the changes in these marketplaces and gig workers and so forth, just always stuck with me. I always just researched it, looked at it, talked to people, and that coalesced to now me being an author. Now, I never had being an author in the plan, ever.
Yeah.
But
Well,
this
you
is
are
exactly
now.
right. This is what you talk about, right? You're like, wait, well, you talk about, I know that social media, that was where you were a pioneer and you knew there's that opportunity to really support people and organizations and make that impact. But like, I don't know if I feel it now. And so I know you've gone through your
Totally.
pivot too, just like all of us. All of us are pivoting all the time. I think that's now the norm.
It's almost like my mom once gave me this. First of all, your story is incredible and you're so inspiring. And thank you for sharing that, because that is hard for the average bear. Growing up in my background, we are heavily Irish culture. So we're first generation. I'm second generation American. My mom's first generation American from Ireland. And we have a very patriarchal, like the son gets the farm. There's obviously not as restrictive as the Asian culture, but a heavy familial responsibility is woven through the way we are conditioned. And so I understand that a little bit. I know that it's not to the degree that what you went through, but or what you were, not what we went through, but what you were kind of embracing and using the best you could to honor your family, but also honor yourself. And so I just congratulate you for finding that space and for having the guts to do it. I mean, it takes guts to go with your gut, and you did. So congrats. And the second thing I want to say is my mom gave me this framed picture one time, and it said, "Not all who wander are lost."
Oh,
And
I love that.
I was so offended when I got it at first. So I was like, oh, so you're just saying I'm just wandering around, like I'm just this aimless wanderer. But then the more I started to think about it, the more I actually really started to love it, because it's like I think there used to be more of a stigma around reinvention as something rootless versus something fruitful. And so I'm also enthusiastic that this movement towards embracing, what's the corporate word for it, pivoting or whatever, whatever, insert corporate buzzword here. But I think that kind of reframing that is going to be huge for not just us, but also for the gals that are watching, the women that are watching us, whether it's, our daughters, our nieces, the interns, the 20 somethings, they're watching. And so I just feel like both of us are super lucky to be in a space where we've even had these choices to make, in general, which is awesome. So congratulations. You're incredible. Before I let you go, tell us about, all great leaders are great readers. This is a podcast about books. So tell us, are you reading any phenomenal business books, nonfiction books by either gals, LGBTQ readers we should be like discovering and following and loving on?
Yes, there is a book in particular. It's by Arlen Hamilton. She actually has created this venture capital firm called Backstage Capital that is focused on minorities and women. And what's so interesting, it's really her story where she never was in venture capital. She actually had a very interesting career mashup. And, she worked in music beforehand and producing, or actually helping with the production of different shows. But she saw an interesting gap, and she was hustling and saw this opportunity to really support those that have been underestimated and who have amazing ideas. And so there's a period where she was homeless and living on people's couches, but she persevered, and she had no context in venture capital at all. And she is in the LGBT community herself. She's an African-American woman who I believe is queer. And so that's not a person that's well represented at all in venture. So to have grit, so to have hustle, and to build a fund
that's incredible
to support that community. I mean, that takes a lot of guts. So some of those insights, it's, all you need is one yes. That you never underestimate the underestimated. I think that's how a lot of us feel. A lot of us women I know I have imposter syndrome. But your ability to write your own headline, chart your own course is so important.
So good. I'm picking that book up immediately. And highlighters, the link to the book, as well as Connie Steele's book, Building the Business of You, will be in the show notes. Connie, thank you for all of your energy, your incredible backstory, your awesome insights. You rock. And it was great to see you today. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.